Hi everybody, this is Greg, and today I'm shooting this video, and it is a video, but it's actually going to be a full-length class that I'm going to be giving. But for those of you that are not in the same city as me, some of you that may not have the time to attend class, I wanted to give you a video on a topic that a lot of people talk about, but I think there's a huge disconnect that nobody talks about. And the class that I'm going to be talking about is a class on emergency funds, right? So a lot of you have heard about, basic rules, 3 months salary, 6 months salary for an emergency fund. But the thing that I want to talk about, I want to talk about today is different than that, is I think that from an emergency fund, right, the dollar amounts that you save versus the level of stress and anxiety on the other side of that equation, I think I have not seen anyone make the correlation between the two or to show a little bit of the differences. So I want to talk about that today. So I'll give you an example, right? Some people might have a large amount of cash in an emergency fund, right? They made a goal, whatever that goal may be, 6 months salary, whatever, and it could be it's certainly in the tens of thousands of dollars. But even though they have a ton, maybe even too much money in an emergency fund, because there's no context to those dollars, and they really don't know what those dollars might cover or take care of or problems it might resolve in the real world, they still might have some level of stress or concern or anxiety, even though they have enough or maybe even more money than they're ever going to need in a jam, right? On the opposite side of that, right, another side, we have some folks that may have not enough money, right? Maybe they have a $5,000-$10,000 emergency fund, and they're feeling good about it, which there's nothing wrong with that. But maybe that feeling of feeling good and secure might be a little bit naive, right? Maybe we haven't looked at what emergencies might come through. And I'm not saying that this is only associated with young people and people with little life experience, because that's not always the case, right? But sometimes we may have a dollar amount and we feel overconfident because we really don't know what emergencies and different types of problems, what do they really cost? Unless we learn the hard way, and we don't want to learn the hard way. So that's why I wanted to create my own course. I want to talk about this because I want to try to bridge those two things. I want you to save enough money. I want you to be aware of what that amount of money can relieve in terms of problems, in terms of life, things that pop up in life. Because that way I want to make sure that not only do we have the dollars, we also have the peace of mind. Because again, a lot about finances we talked about is the emotional roller coaster that it can take you on, right? So let's jump into that. Now, guys, to give you a real world example, kind of tap into some of the emotions that you might have felt in recent years. I want to go back to COVID, right? This article is from April of 2020. Remember back to April, March, back of 2020. COVID hit the world. Most of us didn't know what to expect. There was serious fear and anxiety and stress in this world. This news article talked about non-essential businesses, right? If you can remember back to that time, a lot of us, right? So a lot of us are federal employees. We have the safety and security knowing that we have extremely good job security and stability, right? But what about everyone else in our household? What about our spouse that might work in the private sector, right? Or in a fixed income, maybe they're a little bit older and they're retired already. What about some adult children that might be living with us, or maybe a sibling that might be living with us? And we are safe and secure, but that adult child who's contributing, maybe buying groceries for the house, paying some of the bill, they got laid off, they got furloughed, or they own a small business that went bankrupt, right? So this is some real world situations that when times got hard and unexpected, right? If we didn't have a solid emergency fund, that stress level is going to start to skyrocket, right? So what do we do about that? Okay, guys, this is another example, right? So this is an example of natural disasters that might happen, the type of natural disasters that might happen in our town that are unexpected based on history. Like, I'll give you an example. Some of the people that live maybe in the Houston area, New Orleans, you know that storms are going to frequently hit those areas. And unfortunately, associated with those storms might be flooding, right? So to have a storm, have a flooding there, most people there, hopefully, should be somewhat prepared. But what if you live in a town that experiences a natural disaster that's not expected? In this Texas town, right, and I actually have a personal connection to this town in Temple, Texas, right? This is in Central Texas, and they don't normally get severe weather. And this past summer in 2024, they actually got hit by tornadoes. So in a town that historically has never had horrible weather, right, get hit with devastating tornadoes, right? You got cars flipping, roofs being torn off. So the people in that town, because it hasn't been something common, they may not have enough homeowners insurance. They may not, cars got flipping, you know, the automotive coverage may not be there because they never expected that, right? So again, another circumstances where, you know, you prepare for what is common, right? But what happens when uncommon weather happens in those areas, right? That's another place where an emergency fund might be able to attack the situation so that we can handle the problem and get back to normal life with minimal stress. Okay, let me give you one more example. Okay, so guys, this is an example. Some of you remember this in the summer of 2024. With concern to airlines, there was two major airline issues that happened that summer, right? One of them was a software issue. A software update went wrong, and it really infected a lot of airlines' softwares. So a lot of people got trapped, canceled flights that were backed up and delayed. There were people like this couple here. I actually watched this newscast live. They were stranded in the city that they were in, not home, but the city they traveled to, for days on end, right? Another one was specific to Southwest Airlines. Their systems, for whatever reason, crashed. And again, those specific customers were stuck or trapped or stranded in a location for God knows how long, right? And I bring this thing up because, for example, even if you were on vacation, right? Let's say you went on vacation to Puerto Rico, Mexico, or something like that. If you were in those areas, or maybe you went to a wedding in Denver or in Washington, right? And you were a victim of this thing, here you are, you already spent a ton of money on airline tickets to the vacation, maybe hotel resort money you've paid out, right? Because you want to. Now, on the way home from your vacation, you're stuck. You're stuck in an airport, right? And to get out of that airport, you have to look at something, and I refer to it as an escape plan, where if you don't have an emergency fund, now you're going to be putting those charges on credit cards and falling into debt, right? Because if we can't fly out of a city like Denver, for example, well, maybe we want to take a rent-a-car to a city not too far away, Colorado Springs, and fly out of there, right? Or maybe rent a car and drive all the way back home if it's a day or two drive, right? But essentially, the stressor I'm talking about is the feeling of being trapped and having no other options, and you being a victim to the circumstance and have no empowerment to make it right or to get out of it. And that's what I'm hoping to talk about today with an emergency plan, so that we, on our terms, can get out of those situations and not just be trapped and be victim to long lines and to an airline industry trying to make things right for you, right? So again, this is where the stress meets the dollars. So let's talk about that, okay? So guys, what I want you to do is, many of you are familiar, this is the Statue of Liberty. I want you to look at this image, right? And I want you to take it in. This is not meant to be funny, but if I could depict a plan to you, I want to start with this, the Statue of Liberty, okay? Now, the Statue of Liberty, the building of it, its presence, I want to compare and show similarities to what an emergency plan might look like. And this is the reason why. When we're creating a plan, right, that looks this good and is this strong and this stable, right, there's three goals that I want you to be prepared for. There's three things I want you to be able to accomplish with your emergency fund. And that's when then something wrong happens in your life, right? A water heater blows up, you need new tires in your car, you get stuck somewhere, right? You have a major health issue and you got a deductible you got to cover. I want us, right, to go about this emergency fund First of all, we want to prevent problems from happening. We want to do it diligently. We want to be on purpose to do the things to prevent bad things from happening, right? So we want to be cautious up front to do it. So prevention's worth a ton of cure, right? The second, when things do happen, I want us to be able to respond assertively, quickly, right? We don't got to figure out how to, what credit card to use for this, or do we have the money to do for that? We don't want to be caught flat on our feet when problems happen or trouble looks for us. We want to be able to respond immediately. Understand what the problem is, define what the problem is, identify a possible solution, and then go after it. And finally, when the problem does happen, right, and we address the issue, I think what brings us comfort and minimizes stress in our life is bringing us back to our routine, back to our normal life, right? If you're stranded on that airport floor for untold amount of days, right? All you really want to do after the pain and the agony of not sleeping well and eating airport food is I just want to get back and sleep in my bed. Get back home and sit on my couch and unwind watching some TV, right? So I want to make sure we recover quickly back to our normal lives and move on so that we're not consumed with the problem, right? We address the problem, we move on with life and going back to enjoying our life, right? So these are the goals. And I think, right, by having a plan that's rooted just like the Statue of Liberty, I think we could do that. And now let me explain, right? When we look at something, when we look at this scene and it's something that we enjoy, right? Most of us focus on the beautiful statue, right? Maybe even the beautiful weather around us. But realistically, the most important thing happening in this scene right now is happening down here, right? It is a solid, well-designed, and purposeful foundation, right? Deep into the island, right? So that no matter what happens over the decades, the storms, right? The wind pulling the statue left to right, that this foundation, although it's not exciting, it's not sexy, and it's not shiny, and we can't post pictures of the foundation on Instagram and all that, but it is still very important. So I want you to consider that we first have to consider what is our foundation. Now, built on that foundation, we also have a pedestal here, right? A little bit more artistic, right? A little bit more appreciative, but still built out of very solid, stone and mortar, concrete and whatnot. That also is very important, right? It elevates the statue, right? For the things that we appreciate and the good and the safety and security. But this foundation of this pedestal also has to be built on top of that foundation, right? It's in support of, right? Because we're getting to the good part. And if you could think of this as strong, right? The strong foundation was reducing stress, right? Because we have assurance. Now we get to the body of the statue, right? This is where things go to get artistic. And when I bring this up, things being artistic, this is a higher level of relieving stress, a higher level of confidence in your emergency fund, right? Where you really look at it and you really appreciate it. And when you have a solid foundation, right? You have a supporting pedestal. It's also made of very solid materials. We feel better about not just about how beautiful the statue is, but we have peace of mind that this thing's going to take a beating. This is going to take the beatings of life, right? The weather, the time, the corrosion, whatever it may be, we have more confidence that this statue is not just going to stay beautiful, but it's going to stay beautiful through horrible weather, right? Bad times in life. And finally, if we could look at the body, one of the things that we're proud of, confident in, right, is what maybe it's the cherry on top, is the actual torch that she carries. Right? So although we have all this strong strength and foundation, and we're starting to get to a very comfortable situation and beauty in the statue, right? When we look at the top of that tower, that is for the place where we start to get very confident in our situation, right? Because that is, again, the cherry on top. And guys, if this analogy, if I'm losing you on this, trust me, the next slide will start to make sense to you. So let's go ahead and move on. Okay. Now we look at the same statue, but now I want you to see how I chop it up, right? I look at that foundation, right? And if we cut that foundation and we focus, we're going to start from the bottom up, right? These are our foundational expenses that we need to prioritize. This is where we start accumulating the money to have a strong emergency fund, right? So our foundation, right, it goes into two things. First of all, our monthly bills. No matter what's going on in our life, good, bad, whether we're in town or whether we're traveling, our monthly bills got to get paid, right? We got to keep the power on. We got to pay the mortgage and rent so we don't get evicted or foreclosed on, right? If we're traveling, we want to make sure we're paying that your cell phone data bill, right? So you have cell phone coverage and whatnot. So the foundation of our emergency fund has to cover the monthly bills, okay? And I'll talk more about how many months a little bit later on, but this is the foundation. This is where we start. Second of all, this is this is life and limb, healthcare issues. If we have major healthcare issues, whether it be a health condition and you're admitted into the hospital, maybe an emergency room visit, or an auto accident, right? The next thing is we want to account for the deductibles for those insurances, right? And for those of you that maybe I'm losing right now, the deductible is the cash that you have to pay out of pocket before the insurance really comes in and starts covering major expenses, right? So for example, your auto insurance, if you have $1,000 or $500 or $1,000 deductible, right? Well, the insurance company is gonna, if you get a car accident, the insurance company is certainly gonna pay for some of the damages, but you have to first come out of pocket $1,000, right? That's something that we want saved aside in our emergency fund. Same thing for a homeowner's deductible, right? You may have a $6,000, $8,000 deductible. Well, if you have your roof freaking torn off, shingles flying, windows blown through in a tornado like I showed you earlier, right? The insurance is certainly going to cover a majority of those expenses, but you're going to have to come out of pocket $6,000, $8,000. We want that cash safe and secure in an emergency fund, so it's not adding to the stress. We're already having to move out of our house because we have broken windows and glass and flooding in the house and roof torn off. The worst thing we want in that horrible situation is now go into debt $6,000 because we got to cover a home insurance deductible. And that's why I'm saying, guys, these and below, these are the things we got to focus on first. This is the foundation of that Statue of Liberty, right? There is no beauty, there is no safety and security without the strong foundation first. Okay. Now, let's move up. Okay. Now, when we move up, we're still looking at some very strong and fundamental foundation in this pedestal here, right? So there's still very important, I would say, essential money that we need to have aside for emergencies. Now, the first fund is for a new cell phone. Whether you lose your cell phone or get stolen, our cell phones are now a necessity of life, right? We book hotels, we book Uber rides and whatnot. We can order food. We need our cell phone. I mean, we transfer money on bank apps and whatnot. Our cell phones are now an essential item. Now, I'll talk about that a little bit later because it's such a reasonable replacement. You're right, yeah. You know what I mean? We have to save enough to replace the phone that we lost. So for example, if I have an iPhone 13 and I lose it, right? That doesn't mean I have to go buy the latest iPhone 16. No. We have to save enough to at least buy a replacement iPhone 13 that's still reliable and highly functional, right? So it doesn't mean we have to upgrade, right? The second thing is this ties into your car, right? In an emergency fund, and I'll show you dollar amounts, the amount of money we put aside for a car should cover a couple things. It could be a major repair, right? Thousands of dollars, maybe a transmission change, something that is a major break, $4,000 to $5,000 transmission changes, a major head gasket leak or whatnot. Because guys, our vehicle, for most of us, this is our means to go to work. This is our means to go and earn the money for us to survive. This is the thing that's going to take us or our spouse to the emergency room when we're not feeling well, right? Or taking our kids to and from school, right? So we have to account for that. Another thing is, let's say your car is so broke and so old, that money could be used for either major repairs or it could be for a down payment for a new vehicle, okay? And in an emergency, if it's an emergency type situation, similar to the cell phone, we're not looking to upgrade, right? We're not looking to go from the Toyota to the Audi, right? If what this phone should do is should be enough to put a down payment on a new car at the same price point as your old vehicle, right? So that's what we're looking for, is the dollar amounts to either pay for a major repair, or if it's so far gone, maybe to put a down payment on a new car. Again, because our cars are essential functions in most of our lives, right? So guys, that is the strong pedestal of strength that the beautiful statue sits upon, right? So guys, as we save the amount of money to cover these expenses, our confidence, our peace of mind in the money we're saving versus the problems of life should start to feel better, and we should be able to alleviate stress and feel more confident, right? So we have enough money to cover all these expenses. We're doing pretty good. If we save more money and we're able to cover all these expenses, yeah, we got our act together. We're doing all right, right? We're doing all right. Now, I want to talk to you about these expenses. This is the beauty, the main focus, but also should start giving us a sense of confidence and relieving stress. So this is where I want to focus on what I call expenses for a family, emergency family trip, or an escape plan. So for example, if you have all this saved, we want to save a little bit extra money for an emergency trip. This emergency trip could be an obvious unplanned death in the family. We got to fly across the country for a funeral, or maybe even fly across the seas, right? Maybe our family's in the Philippines, somewhere else in Asia or Europe, right? So we have to be able to fly there. When we fly there, we got to be able to stay somewhere in a hotel. We don't have family to stay with, right? If we do need to rent a car, we have to be able to do that, right? So this is an emergency family trip. I also put clothing because sometimes, let's say we took a 3-day weekend, we took a road trip to another state, and on that vacation, fortunately, we get a call that somebody passed. Now, rather than coming home, we got to fly back to another state for a funeral. Well, if you don't have clothes for a funeral, you might have, our ladies, you might have to buy a new dress. Men, if you don't have a dress shirt and a suit, you might have to do that, right? So just some type of clothes we might be saving for. Another thing I talked about is the escape plan, right? So if we are on a trip and we get snowed in or we get stuck because airlines have frozen outbound flights, right? This money could also be to get out of that town to maybe a neighboring town, or maybe drive all the way back home to get out of the bad circumstance. Again, take charge of our situation, not be a victim that is waiting for the airline to take care of them or something like that, right? So these things are associated with that escape plan. Another thing I want to talk about when I come to escape plan, and I've seen this with the customers I work with, and this is a very touchy and very serious. A lot of time, this same amount of money for an escape plan could also be used for someone who's trapped in a situation like domestic violence, right? Let's say you have someone who is in an abusive relationship, in an abusive job, right? Lives in a horrible neighborhood, right? And they feel trapped that they can't get out because they can't afford to. Because if they leave that apartment or they leave that house, they're going to be homeless that night. They're not aware of shelters or social services that may be out there. So that fear of what they don't know and money they don't have, now they're in an abusive relationship and their financial situation is accelerating stress. That escape plan can also be used for something like that. Get that person on a plane, on a bus, or in a rent-a-car to drive back home to family and supportive friends, right? Matter of fact, you might even see this in there. I have a thing there for a storage unit, right? How many times that, maybe the problems of friends and family, happen in different states, different locations. You might have to rent a storage facility for a month or two to put your items, family members' items, or whatnot, to temporarily store them till you figure out a long-term plan for the problem or solution for the problem, right? So I also put that down there, right? So keep those things in mind, right? This family trip, this emergency trip or escape plan, right? Now, don't get me wrong. I don't think we save for this until we can take care of this. But that's what I'm saying, though. the more we're able to save for these types of things, our confidence should be rising in our situation, and the amount of stress we have should be decreasing, right? As we go up, again, like as we build up to this, the Statue of Liberty. And finally, right, the cherry on top, right? If we're able to do all these things, right, great. Now, worst case scenario, you could do something like this. You could even save cash for when you should pass one day, right? For your burial, your funeral services and whatnot. Now, don't get me wrong. Some of us have life insurance for this kind of stuff and all that. But if you're able to save cash for this, they call it self-insuring, right? Maybe you don't need that life insurance, maybe, right? And at the same time, you know that if you pass, that you're not going to put a burden of your funeral expenses on your family members. So now don't get me wrong, we don't do this until all these other things are taken care of. But again, this is about building confidence and relieving stress. If we're able to do that and be able to prepare for those things, then great. Another thing here, I don't know if you caught it, is what if you get arrested? What if someone in your household gets arrested, right? The last thing you want to happen is that loved one be sitting in jail, so you could even save bail money. Now, guys, some of you might think this is crazy, right? Oh, I'm a professional. All my people, my family are educated and good people. But guys, how many times that when we look at life, maybe I can guarantee you, these are not the things we talk about at dinner parties. These are not the things that we talk about in the lunchroom at work. But guys, bad things happen to good people. Good people make mistakes like forgetting to pay speeding tickets. And now there's a bench warrant out on you, right? You get pulled over for a broken brake light. They run your ID. You have a bench warrant because you forgot to pay a speeding ticket. Or maybe you thought some attorney took care of it for you and they didn't. Now you're in handcuffs, right? Or you go to a Christmas party, have one too many glasses of wine or one too many beers. Now you're handcuffed for a DUI. How many of us want to be in that lockup situation? How many of us want to see someone in our family locked up in that situation, right? So having money available for bail, now don't get me wrong, there's bail bonds, companies out there and all that, but that's why this is at the highest level, is if we have bail money, we know we are prepared. If we do make a bad decision, some of it, we all make bad decisions once in a while, or if trouble just comes looking for us, right? So I'll show you the breakdown for this, where again, this is the highest level of preparedness, this is the highest level of readiness, and hopefully the highest level of confidence if we have enough money to cover these expenses. Okay. Another thing that I'm going to talk about is we don't have to have the money we save for these things doesn't all have to add up, right? We all have to add up. I'll give you an example, right? If you die and you're not going to care about your monthly expenses anymore, right? If you're single, right? But the reason why I break this up and we do have to save for this and save for this is because you heard the expression, when it rains, it pours. Can we be stuck on a vacation and be stuck in an airport, right? When we're stuck there, do you think our mortgage company cares that you're stranded somewhere? No. Mortgage still needs to get paid, right? Utilities still need to get paid. Insurance premiums still need to get paid, right? Can we be on a trip and we get into an auto accident? Yeah. You're driving an unfamiliar car in an unfamiliar town, right? We ought to make sure we have money for that auto insurance premium. Or I'm sorry, the deductible, right? The premiums and the monthly bills. But same thing here. Multiple things can happen at the same time. And that's why we want to make sure that we're accounting for all of them. Okay. So again, like I said, even if you drink one too many beers, you get arrested for a DUI, or someone in your family gets, the bill's still got to get paid, right? How many? You think your cell phone is gonna work properly just because someone's locked? No, your cell phone could break, can go out, right? Your car, you can have car problems. So now you're locked up and you got to check engine light, right? So we don't have to save for absolutely everything. Some of them there's some overlap. But we also have to prepare for more than one bad thing happening at a time. So guys, at this point, let's look at the numbers. So guys, So guys, on this sheet, this is not perfect. This is just an example to show you what those things might cost and now start putting into dollar amounts. Okay, so let's start at the bottom, a solid foundation, right? So this is the monthly bills and then the insurance deductibles that we're supposed to be saving. I just ran some, this is again, basic general numbers for some of those expenses that we might look at. Some of you, right, I put a $2,000 mortgage. Some of you might have a $4,000, $5,000 mortgage, right? Tuition, right now, this person in this example has zero tuition, right? So zero student loans. You may have 200,000 in student loans, right? What is the monthly cost of that? Car payments, some of you have a more expensive car than this, so on and so on and so forth, right? This person only has 1, 2 streaming subscriptions, right? Right, so Hulu and Netflix, you might have 4, right? So this is just an example, right? Putting actual dollars to actual bills. Now, in this case, this person, right, they're spending in just monthly expenses, monthly utilities, $7,200. Well, let's say we want to save for 6 months worth of those expenses, right? So 7,200 times 6, you got to save $43,200 to be able to cover your monthly bills for 6 months. This is where the responsibilities now turn into dollar amounts, right? The thing we talked about in terms of having a solid foundation is also covering insurance deductibles, right? I put down some, now this person is single, so it's health insurance for just self, $500 deductible, dental and vision, there was 0, auto insurance $1,000, home was $6,000. Right? You may have higher deductibles in this person, right? So already we're at $43,200 plus an additional $7,500, right? And we're still at the foundation. Now let's look at the pedestal of the Statue of Liberty, right? That pedestal is still very solid, brick and mortar or concrete and mortar. So this is what I call the strong structure, right? This is that second level, right? A new cell phone, most cell phones are going, I put around $1,200. Major car repair, I put $4,000. Major car repair or maybe a down payment for a reasonable vehicle, okay? So again, this could be different in your world, right? So you're adding those up, we're looking at about an additional $5,200 in your emergency fund. Now, climbing up, this is now the body of the Statue of Liberty, right? This is that confident on the road, right? So it could be an emergency travel plan. So airline tickets, right? Round RT for round trip is maybe $600. This is for a single person, right? If you're a married couple, maybe you have kids, you have to double or triple that. Hotel, $170 a night for 4 nights, $680. Rent a car, $20 a day, very reasonable, economical car for 4 days. And then storage units, I actually looked this up. A large storage unit for 3 months, right? It's about $140 a month. You're looking at $420. So if you're storing something in a move or storing something because someone got evicted, right? You're looking at that. Clothing, I put around $250. This is for a single person, right? So a guy out there going to go buy a very economical suit for a wedding, or a woman finding a decent dress or an outfit for an event that is mandatory. Total up, it's around $2,150, but so I just rounded up to $2,200. But yeah, so this is that escape plan money, right? We're confident while we're on the road if we should have to do detour. Okay. Now it's at the bottom here, but it's at the top. This is the torch of the Statue of Liberty, right? To cover funeral expenses, I looked at average funeral costs in the state of Nevada. I'm in Las Vegas. It's around $9,000. You could look it up in your part of town, or actual call funeral homes and ask them for quotes on services that you want, right? So rather than having a life insurance policy for burial, you save $9K, and from there, what you can do is, heck, maybe cut the life insurance policy you had for burial, just for burial, and then you're good to go. By the way, on the positive side, like I'm a veteran, some of these funeral costs I'm going to get for free through the VA. I'll get a free piece of land or a plot in the ground, or space for my casket. I'm going to get a free headstone. So I could even subtract from that. It might be cheaper for me as a veteran, right? If that's what I want. Now, the other thing I averaged, I looked at national average for bails, and I looked at felonies, if you commit a felony. From a misdemeanor to a felony, in most places, it's around $20,000 for a felony to bail somebody out. But guys, I looked at the cost for bail in California for a felony. It could be up to $200,000, right? So I gave that as a general. So in Nevada, the state of Nevada, it went from about 1 to 20,000. Now this doesn't include things like murder and all that. It could be something like as far as like a DUI with causing an injury or whatnot, right? So guys, again, this is a little spreadsheet. And by the way, I could send you this Excel spreadsheet. You need to modify this for your real world life. And then you could also modify the dollar amount. You could use general dollar amounts, or you could make some phone calls and do some Google searches and get solid numbers, right? Like I actually searched for the storage unit. I searched 3 websites for the 3 units, right? Same thing for bail. I actually looked those things up. Funeral expenses, I looked at statistics and national averages, right? And then, okay, what's the average for Nevada, the state I live in? So this is where the dollar amounts, right, become more tangible for the actual problems and expenses of life. Okay. Now, guys, again, if you want to be really finicky about the numbers, you can be. If you want to be very general about the numbers, you could say, hey, you know what? Considering all this, as a single guy, I have 60,000 aside. I'm pretty solid, right? It may not cover everything, right? But I got some, you know, I'm going to do pretty good. I'm pretty solid. If I got 60,000 aside for 6 months, I get laid off or something like that. I feel pretty good. I can cover most of these expenses. Not all these things are going to happen wrong at the same time, right? So yeah, keep that in mind, right? So, you know, like for example, this $4,000 for the car could also be the same $4,000 that covers a new phone. Right? Highly likely that both of these are going to go wrong at the same time. So you may not have to save $5,200. Maybe we just save maybe save $5,000 and we call it good for these expenses, right? So same thing for this, right? For this emergency plan, we could actually combine these two and say, hey, if I put $10,000 aside for everything going on here, $10,000 will cover a good emergency escape plan. $10,000 will also cover my funeral expenses, and $10,000 if things really go wrong, at least I'll be halfway through bail if something happens, right? So again, guys, this is not necessarily something you just add up, right? You can consolidate, you can compartmentalize, and just even look at those things, and but what we're doing here, I'm not showing you exact math, but I want to start putting expenses with actual dollar amounts. Because yeah, if I'm sitting with $60,000, $80,000 and I'm this person, not only am I good, I'm great. I'm prepared for almost anything. So I should feel a higher level of confidence. I should have really low levels of stress and anxiety about problems coming my way. Okay. So again, this is something you can do for yourself, and I'll send you this spreadsheet if you want. I think you could just pencil this down on a notepad and do it yourself. But I do think it's worth adding those things up to get real world numbers. Now, guys, what I want to talk to you about now, and this video is running a little bit long, but is now that you understand the dollar amounts that you need, right? I want to talk to you about where do you put those dollar amounts in the meantime, right? 95% of our life is going to be good times, and we're preparing only for the worst days. So where do you put your money? I want to talk about a few places that you could do that and kind of have a conversation about it, right? So most of us, when we start saving $50,000, $60,000, $80,000, our instinct is to put it in banks and credit unions, right? So I want to talk about that. Some of the things that I would consider when I'm saving my money in those places is we want to make sure we're putting them in institutions, a bank or credit union that is insured, right? So banks, they're insured by the FDIC, credit unions insured by the NCUA. So we want to look at that. I would also say be mindful. There's a lot of online banks out there that that's all they claim is that they're insured, but maybe they're not so well established. I'm going to talk about that in the next point, right? So don't just go for any bank that is insured. The next thing, some of you have seen this expression before. I would put my money in a bank or a credit institution that is so big and so significant, right, that it literally is too big to fail. And what does that mean? That means if something financially goes crazy or goes wrong in this country, you know that bank, because it is so significant to the American economy, right, that the government is going to back that bank to make sure that bank and its account holders are safe and secure. Okay, there's an expression right here. It's called GSIB banks, right? Globally systematically important banks. You can look that up, and it'll tell you the banks that, all BS aside, are too big to fail. Someone in the government in America and Europe are going to bail these banks out, and when they're bailing them out, they're bailing you out to make sure your money is secure. I also recommend, whether you split your money between banks and credit unions, that you would keep an account in at least one brick and mortar institution, right? So this is one bank credit. You could actually walk in the front door. Reason being is, at least at that point, if you need a cashier's check cut, you can get it done. If you need a notary for some reason, usually they have a notary service for free for those account holders. And on top of that, if you need cash, right? We talked about bail, or we talked about auto repairs. If you need a large amount of cash, more than something you can spit out of an ATM, you want to be able to walk in and get that cash, and you want to get it easily. In terms of saving the money, so the money is not just making very, very fractional percents. Banks and credit unions also have you to be able to put your money in money market funds. Money market funds, they call them as good as cash, are funds where you can put your cash, where they make a little bit more interest every month, because this is an account to hold your cash, right? And banks and credit unions usually have money market funds where you can make a little bit more interest than just your normal checking and savings account, right? Right, and that goes to this too, right? So banks and credit unions usually have, some of them have high yield savings accounts, right? I think of them as cousins to money market funds, where you can save your money, can attempt to keep up inflation. It's not great, but you're making a little bit more money than if it's just sitting in cash, right? And you can get that through banks and credit unions. On top of that, when it comes time to spend and pay for those emergency items, most of these banks are going to have credit cards, debit cards that you can use as tools, and I'll talk about that next, to solve those problems. That credit card to rent a car and get the storage facility, and or to pay for the insurance and whatnot. Okay, so that's some of the appeals of putting your money in a bank or a credit union. So another option to hold that money, right, could be a home safe, safety deposit box at banks. And I still do know people who put money under their mattress, right? So the good thing about these options, right, especially a home safe or having it in your house, is 24-hour access, right? I remember during like the first 2 or 3 really bad days of COVID, when they shut everything down, you couldn't even go into a bank and get cash to go buy groceries, right? So maybe having some cash in a home safe might be advisable. I know I learned that lesson. And by the way, guys, another tip, something to think about, is even keeping cash locked in your vehicle, maybe the glove compartment or whatnot, right? Maybe, and I know there's a risk, your car getting broken in, but I think you got to weigh the positives and the negatives of having maybe at least $200 in cash in your car, in your compartment, to pay cash for a tow, right? For a tow truck that may not be able to, maybe it's a local guy who, the only guy available in the middle of the desert or in the middle of a scenic road trip is a guy who only works for cash. You want to have at least enough money to pay a tow to get you out of that bad situation, right? So keeping your money in cash, precious metals, paper treasury bonds, these are ways to keep your money very liquid in cash, but still safe, secure, and maybe make a little bit more interest than just a regular savings account, okay? Another thing to keep, I just talk about this in terms of worst case scenario and safety, is, right, having a place. I really am losing a lot of faith in safety deposit boxes. I'm hearing just too many stories about banks and their systems not jiving, and people who are having things in safety deposit boxes that banks records get screwed up and all that. So I wouldn't put a single thing in a safety deposit box. But keeping things safe and secure, maybe like your firearms, your important documents and IDs, right? So when we're thinking about saving and securing our cash, or like a getaway plan, or paying off or putting a down payment on a new car, right? So we want to make sure we have our important documents and IDs, our passports, or Social security cards, things like those places, safe and secure for emergencies, right? Another place where you can put that cash or your emergency money is in a U.S. Treasury account. This is the website Treasury Direct, and buy U.S. Treasury bonds, right? So your money is very safe and secure. You could turn it from a Treasury bond to cash in maybe at 1 or 2 business days, but your money will still be able to make a little bit of interest, right? Maybe try and keep up with inflation. So that's just another avenue where you can keep money for that emergency fund. Now, guys, we have the money and we stored it in 1 or 2 or 3 places to keep it secure, right? The asset location. Now, how do we take that money and actually go out and solve the problems of emergencies, right? One way is credit cards, right? Credit cards are widely accepted almost everywhere. Some of the things that I recommend is have at least a $10,000 limit on your card, right, to solve. And also accept it everywhere, right? I'm not going to give you the specific brands of credit cards you should have, but you want to look at ones that are accepted almost anywhere for almost anything. Plus, if you travel frequently, international fees. So you want to make sure that if you're spending your card, it could be as close as Mexico, it could be Europe and Asia, right? You're already in a bind, it's already an emergency. You don't want to get a card that's charging you international fees because you're using it overseas, right? So credit cards are a great way to solve problems in an emergency, right? And if you can get good interest on it or cash back, even better, right? It's another conversation. Another thing is cash, actual cash, right? So whether it be large bills, enough to cover any transaction they might only accept cash, right? So maybe the only place to buy food is at the farmer's market, right? Or maybe, like I mentioned earlier, the only tow truck driver in that area in the middle of the desert is a guy who works for cash. You want to make sure you have a little bit of cash, right, to cover the emergencies. Think about your circumstances. Another thing, I've seen this, money orders and cashier's checks, right? If you got to pay an apartment complex for rent or something like that, they may not accept cash, they may not, or they might charge extra fees for credit cards, right? So even consider, and this is why I remember I went back to the brick and mortar bank, maybe identify a place that can get you a money order, even in the late evening, maybe 10, 11 o'clock at night, and cashier's check from a brick and mortar bank, right? So a lot of grocery stores are doing money orders these days, so you could at least identify those places so you're not waiting to an emergency. The last thing I got here is online access, right? A lot of these problems we can solve by making online payments or online transfers of money. So this goes back to your cell phone, but I'll tell you what, most of my problems that I resolve with cash, guys, I don't feel comfortable doing those things on a phone. I don't trust the security. The apps are never more intuitive as the actual website. So I also always make sure I have a reliable laptop computer when I travel, right? So this, again, make online payments, right? This is how, again, what if we're out of town and we got to pay our monthly bills, right? We want to be able to make sure we have a good computer to pay those monthly bills, right? If we want to book an airline ticket, right, and so forth, right? So whether it be writing, doing e-checks, ACH, these are cash transfers, online transfers. That's another way we can solve problems during an emergency, is the access of a laptop and making those online payments. Okay, guys, so that's all there is for me right now. I hope that I was able, again, to make the connection between dollar amounts and problems that we can anticipate in life, to, again, make sure that we have the dollars to alleviate the stress. And if we don't have enough dollars, not have that false sense of security, and hey, let's work on saving a little bit more. Guys, one of the last things I want to say is this is not a all or nothing circumstance, right? This is something that it's not, well, you have it and you're in good shape, and you don't have it, yeah, you're in horrible shape, you should lose sleep at night. No, an emergency fund is something, especially for our younger or folks that may be having a new beginning in life, right? It's something that is built, right? And as we built it, right, whether we're crawling out of debt or we're building our emergency fund, we want to make sure that our balance is growing great, but also the amount of stress that we're relieving is getting better as well, right? Because, guys, again, what good is money if we're not feeling confident in our circumstance and we're not relieving stress? So please take some of the things I talked about. Guys, this is not the answer to everything. I just wanted to plant a bunch of ideas that maybe you're not thinking about. You make it your own. And on top of that, try to think of other things that are going on in your life, the city you're living in, your family structure, all kinds of other things so that we create emergency funds, again, that help us get up every morning, feel confident that no matter what life throws our way, we are equipped, or we're getting there, to be confident in our situation, right? With that said, guys, thank you for your time. If you have any questions or any comments, reach out to me. Sorry the video is pretty long. I think this is a very important topic to talk about, though. So with that, have a great day, guys.